Caleb Rowan thought he had grown used to life pinning him against the wall, raising a 6-year-old daughter alone, drowning in debt, working a job that barely kept them afloat. But that morning, when he was summoned to the 36th floor to meet the most powerful woman in the company, everything went far beyond the fear of being fired. Astra Vale did not fire him. She looked him straight in the eye and said she needed him to pretend to be her husband for 1 year. Caleb froze. Then he asked the only question that mattered, half joking, half serious. "So we're sharing a bed?" And that was when the real trouble began. It was 8:45 on a Monday night when Caleb's phone buzzed. The daycare worker told him his daughter had a fever and needed to be picked up early the next morning if it did not break. He said he would be there. He always was. Caleb hung up and rubbed his eyes, his dark brown skin catching the blue light from his computer screen. The kind of exhaustion that came from juggling too many things at once and dropping most of them. He had been doing this for 3 years now, ever since his wife died, and left him with a 6-year-old, a pile of medical bills, and a life held together with duct tape and hope. The office was nearly empty. Caleb was halfway to the elevator when he turned the corner too fast and collided with someone. A leather portfolio hit the floor, papers scattered across the polished tile. Caleb dropped to his knees immediately, apologizing as he gathered the documents. The woman crouched across from him, her movements precise and controlled. He looked up and recognized her instantly. Astra Vale, vice president, the kind of person who did not make small talk and did not need to. She was 29, her deep brown skin flawless under the fluorescent lights, her natural hair styled in an elegant twist. She was cold in the way that powerful people often were. She thanked him without warmth and turned to leave. That should have been the end of it. But Caleb noticed something she had missed. A sealed envelope, cream-colored and embossed, half hidden beneath a filing cabinet. He picked it up and called out to her. Astra stopped, turned back. He jogged toward her, holding the envelope out. Astra took it and opened her purse. She pulled out 5 crisp $100 bills and held them toward him. Caleb stared at the money, then at her. He shook his head and said he was just returning something that was not his. He did not need to be paid for that. Astra's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to solve an unexpected puzzle. She asked if he was sure. Caleb said he was. Then he walked away, leaving her standing there with the money still in her hand. What Caleb did not know was that Astra Vale did not forget things like that. She went back to her office and pulled up the employee directory. Caleb Rowan, copywriter, lower tier, single father, financial history strained, no corporate alliances, no connections to her brother Marcus. She leaned back in her chair and considered it. Marcus had been circling her position for years. Astra needed someone clean, someone she could control. Caleb Rowan fit the profile perfectly. 7 days later, Caleb received an email from Human Resources. He was being summoned to the 36th floor at 9 in the morning. No explanation, just a meeting request with Astra Vale's name attached. He showed up wearing the only suit he owned that still fit. The 36th floor was glass and steel, all sharp edges and cold light. A receptionist directed him to a conference room at the end of the hall. He walked in and found Astra sitting at the head of a long table. She gestured to the chair across from her. Caleb sat. Astra did not waste time. She told him she had reviewed his employment record. She said he was competent, reliable, and unremarkable. Then she said something that made his stomach drop. She needed him to do something for her, something that had nothing to do with his job. Astra told him about her father's will. The company had been left to her, but there was a clause. The person in control of Vale Marketing Solutions had to be married. If Astra did not marry before her 30th birthday, control of the company would transfer to Marcus. Caleb asked when her birthday was. Astra said in 11 months. She needed a husband, not a real one, a contract. 12 months. No emotion, no complications, just a performance. Caleb asked why him. Astra said because he had no reason to refuse. She had done her research. He owed over $120,000 in medical debt from his wife's illness. He was 2 months behind on rent. Astra could fix all of that. She could erase his debt, double his salary, provide health insurance, and set up an education fund for his daughter. All he had to do was play the role. Caleb asked what playing the role meant. Astra said it meant moving into her penthouse, attending family dinners, posing for photographs, convincing her brother and the board that they were a real couple. Caleb asked if they would be sharing a bed. Astra's expression did not change. She said only when necessary, only when they needed to convince someone who mattered. Caleb told her he needed 24 hours to think about it. Astra said that was fine and handed him a folder with the terms written out in legal language he barely understood. That night, Caleb sat in his daughter's room and watched her sleep. Her brown skin glowed softly in the nightlight, her tiny braids spread across the pillow. He thought about the life he was giving her, the cramped apartment, the secondhand clothes, the constant fear that one bad month would put them on the street. He thought about what Astra was offering: stability, security, a future that did not involve him lying awake at 3 a.m, doing math in his head and coming up short every time. He picked up his phone and typed out a message. He told Astra he would do it, but his daughter stayed out of it. No publicity, no involvement. Astra replied within 2 minutes. She agreed. Caleb set the phone down and closed his eyes. He had just sold himself. He was not sure if that made him smart or desperate. Probably both. The contract was signed 3 days later. Everything was there: the money, the timeline, the rules. No emotional attachment, no physical relationship unless required for appearances. Termination clause after 12 months. He moved in on a Friday. The penthouse was cold and immaculate, the kind of place that looked staged for a magazine shoot. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Astra showed him to a guest room at the far end of the hall. She told him the rules again. No crossing boundaries, no personal questions, no expectations beyond what was written in the contract. That Sunday, they attended their first family dinner at the Vale estate. Marcus was there, leaning against the bar with a glass of whiskey, his skin a shade lighter than Astra's, his tailored suit fitting him like armor. He smiled when he saw Caleb, the kind of smile that did not reach his eyes. He walked over and shook Caleb's hand, his grip just a little too tight. Marcus said it was a surprise. He had not known Astra was seeing anyone. Astra said they had kept it quiet. Marcus asked how they met. Caleb said at the office. Marcus raised an eyebrow and asked what Caleb did. Astra cut in before Caleb could answer. She said Caleb was in marketing. Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Caleb like he was trying to find the lie. Dinner was stiff and formal. Caleb sat beside Astra, his hand resting on the back of her chair because that was what a husband would do. Astra placed her hand over his at one point, a brief touch that looked natural but felt rehearsed. Her skin was warm against his. Marcus watched them from across the table. On the drive home, Astra said Marcus did not believe them. Caleb asked how she knew. She said because Marcus never believed anything she did was real. The first 2 weeks in the penthouse felt like living in a museum where Caleb was both the exhibit and the security guard. Astra left for the office before he woke up and returned after he had already eaten dinner alone. They exchanged maybe 10 sentences a day, most of them logistical. 3 weeks after he moved in, Astra told him they had another family dinner. This one was at a restaurant downtown, the kind where the waiters wore white gloves and the menu did not list prices. Marcus would be there. So would 2 other board members. Astra said they needed to be convincing. Marcus arrived exactly on time, flanked by 2 older men in tailored suits. He greeted Astra with a kiss on the cheek that looked affectionate and felt like a threat. They sat down, and the performance began. Marcus asked how married life was treating them. One of the board members asked Caleb what he did at the company. Caleb said he was a copywriter. Astra reached across the table and placed her hand over Caleb's, her touch deliberate and warm. She said they had kept it quiet because they did not want office gossip. Marcus watched the whole exchange without saying a word. When the appetizers arrived, he finally spoke again. He said he had always thought Astra would end up with someone from their circle, someone who understood the family business. Astra said Caleb understood more than Marcus gave him credit for. Marcus said he hoped so, because the company was not kind to people who did not belong. By the time they left, Caleb's jaw hurt from clenching it. When they got back to the penthouse, Astra poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the window, looking out at the city below. Caleb asked if she thought they had pulled it off. Astra said Marcus did not believe them. She turned to face him, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked tired. Not just physically, tired in the way people get when they have been fighting too long. She said Marcus had always been the favorite. Their father had groomed him to take over from the time he was 16. Astra had been an afterthought, and then their father had died and left the company to Astra anyway, with one impossible condition attached. Marcus had never forgiven her for it. Caleb said he was sorry. Astra looked at him like she did not know what to do with the apology. Then she finished her wine and said goodnight. The following week, the power went out. A storm rolled through the city. The penthouse went dark just after 10. Astra came into the living room holding her phone like a flashlight. Caleb found 2 wine glasses and poured them each a drink. Astra sat on the opposite end of the couch. They sat in the dark for a while without speaking. Then Astra asked him why he had really agreed to this. Caleb said she already knew why. She said she knew what the contract said. She wanted to know what he had been thinking when he signed it. Caleb took a long drink and said he had been thinking about his daughter, about what kind of father lets his kid grow up poor when he has a chance to fix it. Astra asked if he regretted it. Caleb said he did not know yet. He asked if she regretted it. Astra said no. She said she would do whatever it took to keep Marcus from winning. They talked until the power came back on 2 hours later. Astra told him about growing up in the Vale house, about being invisible until it was convenient for her not to be, about her father's expectations and her mother's silence. Caleb told her about his wife, about the last 6 months of her life when the hospital had become their second home, about holding her hand as she took her last breath. When the lights flickered back to life, they both blinked against the sudden brightness. Astra stood and said she should get back to work. She stopped at the doorway and looked back at him. She said thank you. The next Saturday, Caleb mentioned over breakfast that he was taking his daughter to the park. Astra surprised him by asking if she could come. She said she wanted to see what his life looked like outside the penthouse. Caleb hesitated, then said yes. He was pushing his daughter on the swings when Astra arrived. She was wearing jeans and a cream sweater, no makeup, her natural hair loose in soft curls. She looked younger, more vulnerable. His daughter noticed her first and asked who the lady was. Caleb said she was a friend. Astra walked over and said hello, crouching down to be at eye level with the little girl. His daughter asked if Astra was his girlfriend. Caleb opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Astra looked at him, then back at his daughter, and said she was. His daughter asked if that meant Astra was going to be her new mom. Astra looked at Caleb, and he could see the panic in her eyes, brief but real. He told his daughter that was not how it worked. They walked along the edge of the pond while his daughter ran ahead. Astra asked about her. Caleb told her the basics. 6 years old, smart, obsessed with dinosaurs. Astra smiled, the expression genuine and unguarded, and said she sounded amazing. Caleb said she was. Astra asked what his daughter knew about the arrangement. Caleb said nothing, and it was going to stay that way. Astra said his daughter was lucky to have him. That night, Caleb lay in bed and thought about the way Astra had looked at his daughter, not with detached politeness, but with something quieter, something that looked like longing. 2 weeks later, they had their wedding photos taken. The photographer met them at a studio downtown. He posed them in front of a white backdrop, told them to stand closer, to look at each other, to smile like they meant it. The photographer asked Astra to rest her head on Caleb's shoulder. She did, her hair soft against his neck. He asked Caleb to put his arm around her waist. Caleb hesitated. Astra whispered that it was fine. He put his arm around her and she leaned into him, and for a brief moment it did not feel like acting. The photographer asked them to look at each other. They did. Caleb looked into Astra's eyes and saw something he had not expected. Vulnerability, fear. The same things he felt every time he thought about the next 10 months. The photographer snapped the photo and Astra stepped back immediately, the moment breaking like glass. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. When they got back to the penthouse, Astra went straight to her office and closed the door. Caleb sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling. He was starting to realize that the lines they had drawn were not as clear as either of them had thought. A month later, Marcus sent an email. It was addressed to the entire board, but it was really meant for Astra. He raised concerns about her leadership, questioned her recent decisions. It was corporate speak for a coup. Astra read it 3 times, her hands shaking with anger. Then she called Caleb into her office and told him Marcus was making his move. Caleb asked what that meant. Astra said it meant Marcus was going to try to prove their marriage was fake. He was going to dig into Caleb's past, find the contract, and expose everything. The next day, Marcus called Caleb. He said he wanted to meet, just the 2 of them. Caleb agreed, even though every instinct told him it was a trap. Before he left, Astra told Caleb to record everything, just in case. They met at a coffee shop near the office. Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth, his expensive watch glinting under the lights. Marcus said he appreciated Caleb coming. He said he wanted to be direct. He knew Astra had hired Caleb. He knew about the debt. He knew about the contract. Marcus leaned forward and said he was offering Caleb a way out. If Caleb walked away now, Marcus would make sure the contract stayed buried. Caleb could go back to his life, keep the money Astra had already given him, and move on. All he had to do was disappear. Marcus said it was the smart play. Then he stood and walked out. Caleb sat there for a long time after Marcus left. He thought about the offer. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the life he could have if he just took the out Marcus was giving him. And then he thought about Astra sitting in that office, working until midnight, fighting a battle she did not know how to win. He thought about the way she had looked at him in the dark when the power was out, the way she had smiled at his daughter in the park. Caleb picked up his phone and called Astra. He told her about the meeting. He told her what Marcus had offered. And then he told her he was not going anywhere. Astra did not say anything for a long moment. Then she asked him why. Caleb said because Marcus was wrong. This was not going to end with them falling. It was going to end with them still standing. Astra thanked him, her voice quieter than he had ever heard it. Caleb said she did not need to thank him. He had made his choice. Marcus moved faster than Caleb had expected. Within a week, Astra received a notification that an emergency board meeting had been called. Marcus had found something, or he thought he had. Either way, he was ready to make his play. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10. Astra told Caleb he did not need to come. He said he was coming anyway. She asked why. He said, because if Marcus was going to burn them both, he wanted to be in the room when it happened. The night before the meeting, Caleb could not sleep. Around 3 a.m, he got up and walked to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Astra standing in the doorway. She was wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf. She looked more human than he had ever seen her. She asked if he was okay. Caleb said he was fine. She said he was a terrible liar. Caleb asked if she was scared. Astra said yes. She said she had spent her entire life trying to prove she was good enough. And tomorrow, Marcus was going to stand in front of the board and tell them she was a fraud. Caleb said she was not a fraud. She said it did not matter what the truth was, it mattered what they believed. Caleb asked what she was going to do. Astra said she was going to tell the truth. She was going to admit that the marriage was a contract. She was going to admit that she had paid him. And then she was going to remind the board that her father's will was outdated and controlling, and that she had been running the company better than Marcus ever could. Caleb asked if she thought it would work. Astra said no, but it was the only move she had left. They stood there in the kitchen, the silence stretching between them. Then Caleb said he was not going to let her do this alone. Astra looked at him, and for the first time since he had met her, her mask slipped completely. She asked why he was still here, why he had not taken Marcus's offer and walked away when he had the chance. Caleb said maybe because he was tired of running, maybe because he had spent 3 years watching his wife die and feeling powerless. And this was the first time in a long time that he felt like he could actually fight for something. Astra said he was going to lose. Caleb said maybe, but at least he would lose standing up. Astra smiled, just a little, and said he was either very brave or very stupid. Caleb said it was probably both. The boardroom was on the 40th floor, all glass walls and leather chairs. Caleb sat beside Astra at the far end of the table, facing Marcus and the rest of the board. There were 7 people in total, not counting Astra and Caleb. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his expression calm and confident. He looked like a man who had already won. The meeting started with pleasantries. The board chair, a distinguished black man in his 60s named Elias Warren, thanked everyone for coming. Then he turned the floor over to Marcus. Marcus stood and said he had become aware of troubling information that suggested Astra had not been entirely forthcoming with the board about her personal life. He opened a folder and pulled out a stack of documents. He said he had proof that Astra's marriage to Caleb was not what it appeared to be. He laid out the evidence piece by piece: the contract, the financial transfers, the timeline of when Caleb's debts had been paid. He said Astra had hired Caleb to play the role of her husband so she could satisfy the terms of their father's will. He said it was fraud. He said it called into question her integrity and her fitness to lead the company. The room went silent. All eyes turned to Astra. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table. Then she stood. She said Marcus was right. She had entered into a contract with Caleb. She had paid his debts. She had asked him to pretend to be her husband for 1 year. She said all of that was true, and she was not going to apologize for it. Astra said the problem was not that she had hired Caleb. The problem was that their father had written a will that treated marriage like a qualification for leadership. She said it was archaic and insulting, and she had done what she needed to do to work around it. She said she had spent the last 3 years increasing revenue by 38%, expanding into 2 new markets, and turning Vale Marketing Solutions into one of the most respected firms in the industry. She asked the board if any of that would have been possible if Marcus had been in charge. Marcus said that was not the point. The point was that she had lied. Astra said she had played the game she was forced to play. The two of them stared at each other across the table, and Caleb could feel the years of resentment crackling in the air between them. Then Caleb stood up. Every head in the room turned toward him. He said he had something to say. Elias asked if it was relevant. Caleb said it was. He said Marcus had come to him 2 weeks ago and offered him money to walk away. He said Marcus had tried to bribe him into abandoning Astra so he could expose the contract without interference. Marcus said that was a lie. Caleb pulled out his phone, opened his recording app, and played the audio from their coffee shop meeting. Marcus's voice filled the room, offering Caleb a way out, promising to bury the contract if Caleb disappeared. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions hardening. Elias asked Marcus if the recording was accurate. Marcus said it had been taken out of context. Caleb continued. He said Astra had given him access to her internal files to help prepare for this meeting. While reviewing them, he had discovered something. Marcus had been using his executive access to monitor Astra's emails and calendar for months. He had been tracking her meetings, her communications with the board, even her personal correspondence. It was a direct violation of company policy and a breach of fiduciary duty. Caleb handed Elias a folder with printed evidence, email logs, access records, timestamps that showed Marcus had been systematically spying on his own sister. The room went quiet. Elias flipped through the documents, his expression hardening with each page. He looked at Marcus and asked if this was true. Marcus said he had been conducting due diligence. Elias said it looked like corporate espionage. Another board member said it was grounds for immediate removal. Caleb said he had stayed because Astra was the best person to run this company, contract or no contract. He said he had seen her work harder than anyone he had ever met. He said she had not manipulated anyone. She had just refused to let an outdated rule destroy everything she had built. He said if the board wanted to punish someone, they should punish the system that forced her into this position in the first place. The room went quiet again. Elias looked at Marcus, then at Astra, then at Caleb. He said the board needed time to deliberate. He asked everyone except the board members to leave the room. Astra, Caleb, and Marcus filed out into the hallway. Marcus glared at Caleb and said he had just made a very big mistake. Caleb said he did not think so. Marcus walked away without another word. Astra and Caleb stood in the hallway, waiting. After 30 minutes, the door opened and Elias stepped out. He said the board had reached a decision. Marcus was being removed from his position on the board for ethical violations and abuse of executive access. Astra would retain her position as vice president, but the marriage contract had to be dissolved within 30 days. The board would also be reviewing the terms of the will with legal counsel to determine if the marriage clause could be challenged or removed entirely. Elias said it was not a perfect outcome, but it was the best they could do given the circumstances. He told Astra she was lucky to have someone willing to stand up for her the way Caleb had. Then he went back into the boardroom and closed the door. Astra turned to Caleb, and for a long moment she just looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Then she said, "Thank you." Caleb said she did not need to thank him. She said she did. They left the building together and walked to the parking garage in silence. When they got to Astra's car, she stopped and turned to face him. She said the contract was over. He did not have to stay. Caleb said he knew. Astra asked if he was going to leave. Caleb said he did not know yet. He said he needed to figure out what his life looked like now that it was not being dictated by a piece of paper. Astra nodded. She said she understood. Then she got in her car and drove away. Caleb stood there in the parking garage, watching her tail lights disappear, and felt something heavy settle in his chest. He had won. They had both won. But it did not feel like victory. It felt like the end of something he had not realized he wanted to keep. 2 weeks later, Caleb moved his things out of the penthouse. Astra was not there when he left. She had said goodbye the night before, standing in the doorway of his room, telling him she hoped he found whatever it was he was looking for. He went back to his old apartment, back to his old life, back to the rhythm he had known before Astra Vale had walked into it. He picked up his daughter from daycare, made her dinner, read her a bedtime story. Everything was the same, except it was not, because he kept thinking about the woman in the penthouse, the one who had bought his time, but had somehow ended up with more than that. 3 days after he moved out, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Astra. It said she wanted to meet, not as his boss, not as his ex-wife, just as herself. Caleb stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, and said yes. They met at a coffee shop on the east side, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and indie music playing too loud. Astra was already there when Caleb arrived, sitting by the window with a cup of tea in front of her. She was wearing jeans and a plain white shirt, no makeup, her hair in its natural state, beautiful coils framing her face. She looked nervous. Caleb had never seen her look nervous before. He sat down across from her and said hello. Astra said hello back. Then she said she had been thinking about the last few months, about everything that had happened, about the way it had ended. She said she had spent so long pretending to be someone she was not, that she had forgotten what it felt like to just be honest. She said she wanted to try that now, with him, if he was willing. Caleb asked what that meant. Astra said it meant no contract, no performance, no conditions. Just two people who had been through something strange and difficult together, trying to figure out if there was something real underneath all of it. She said she did not know if it would work, but she wanted to try. She asked if he did too. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman who had stood in front of a boardroom and refused to apologize. The woman who had sat with him in the dark and told him the truth. The woman who had smiled at his daughter in the park like she was trying to remember what it felt like to want something simple. He said yes. He wanted to try. Astra smiled, and it was not the cold, controlled smile she wore in meetings. It was real, warm, reaching her eyes. She said good. Then she asked him the question that had started all of this, the one that had been hanging between them since the first day. She said, "So are we sharing a bed?" Caleb laughed. He said maybe, but not tonight. Astra said, that was fair. They sat there for a while, drinking coffee and talking about nothing in particular. And for the first time since they had met, neither of them was pretending. They were just two people trying to figure out what came next. And that, Caleb thought, was a pretty good place to start.